If you've ever been intimidated by layering stencils, or maybe you've used some layering stencils in the past and it just hasn't worked out for you, this class is going to be all for you. I'm going to make two different cards, but using the same exact layering stencil, the same exact ink colors. We're just going to change up one technique and you're going to get a totally different look. Before I dive into today's video, I want to thank Craftsy for sponsoring my video today. And they're offering the first 1,000 of you a whole year of premium membership for just $1.49. Seriously. So Craftsy is an online hub for all things creative. It's got classes in everything from painting to knitting to photography to cake decorating. This little origami class I'm going to take with my daughter for Christmas. I'm also getting into gardening, so I typed in gardening and found a class. I want to learn how to make my own cut flower bouquets. I've got them all over my house now and I've bought them all, but gosh, wouldn't it be nice if I could figure out how to do it myself. So Craftsy has over 2,000 classes across 20 categories. There's something out there for everyone, no matter what you're into. Whether you want to level up your knitting, or you want to go bake something, or you want to try something totally new like woodworking, whatever. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. It's all going to be there. Just type it in the search bar and all the classes are going to come up, and it's pretty cool. So don't miss out on this deal. Use my link below and be one of the first 1,000 people to get a full year of Craftsy Premium for just $1.49. So I am going to be working off of the Waffle Flower grip mat here. Imagine what your stamps come like, a photopolymer stamp. It's a big, giant, solid photopolymer stamp with grid lines on it. And it keeps everything secure. It sticks to my work surface, and it also will help everything stick to the top of the surface that I'm working with. Of course, you don't need this. You can work off of your desktop or your desk, your glass mat, whatever it is that you have that you work off of. The stencils that I'm going to use for today are called the Rose Duo stencils from the 10 stamps. They have 4 stencils in it total. And and it comes with a coordinating die. I just cannot get over how beautiful this stencil is, and you'll see firsthand. Now, that little thing I have that's stuck on that grip mat, that's called the stencil extender. That basically protects the grip mat. So any ink that maybe goes around the edges will actually go on that plastic piece, which is easy to rinse off. So it's just basically a little added piece to make your inking easier. None of this is required for the technique. You just need a good layering stencil, some ink, and some blending brushes. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is ink up the base layer. Now I have 2 pieces of cardstock, so I'm going to do the same thing twice every single time. I have a regular white piece of cardstock, which is what I'm using now, and then I have a piece of watercolored cardstock. That's because we're going to do a different technique on the watercolored cardstock once we get these 2 designs laid down on the paper. Let's talk ink for a second. Use whatever colored inks you have. My personal favorites are Catherine Pooler inks. I love them. The colors are beautiful. The party and spa lines are beautiful. You can do a lot of techniques with these inks. They're water reactive, which you'll see here in a bit. So those are the ink colors I'm working off of. So with layering stencils, you usually start with your lightest color first, and then you start building on the color. So for the first stencil, stencil 1, we're using a light color. So I chose to go with pink. You don't have to stick to the colors that I'm using. You can use whatever colors you want. If you are curious about the colors that I'm using, they will be linked in the supply list for you. All right, so I've got my first stencil down, so now it's time to move on to stencil number 2. I'll go ahead and keep that watercolor cardstock in place. I don't need to move it yet because we're just going to put the same design on both of them. So I will just line up the stencil. It's very easy to line up. You can tape your stencil down if you want. I'm not going to because I'm lazy, but if you want it more secure and in place, you can certainly tape it down. But once you get that lined up, you can go ahead and start blending your next color. So I chose to go with Garden Party, which is going to be the lightest shade of green that I'm doing here. So this particular stencil is just the leaves. We're not blending over the flower or anything. So this one was pretty easy to put down. Nothing special here. I'll go ahead and remove this piece of cardstock and pull in the other one and do the same thing. Now let's talk blending brushes while I'm doing some basic blending. I have many blending brushes. I have blending brushes from Amazon, Waffle Flower, Catherine Pooler, all kinds. I've got them all. And honestly, I love them all, but I'm perfectly fine with my Amazon brushes. They're very inexpensive. Like you get for $10, you get like 17 of them. So they work just fine for me. Use whatever you have that works for you. I feel like there are blending domes. Those are great. Little fingertip daubers. Those are great. Use what you got. All right, so moving on to stencil number 3. This actually has 2 elements. We're going to be doing the leaves and the flowers. So line it up, tape it down if you want to, and we'll go in with the next color, deepest color of green, or whatever color it is that you choose. I'll be doing lime Rickey for the leaves. Now, I had forgotten that there are flowers there too, so I got a little bit of the green on the pink. As you can see there on the top, don't worry about it. I'm going to keep rolling with it. I'm not going to worry about it in the least, and once we're finished with this, you won't be able to tell. So now I've got the color of the leaves down. I'm going to go in with Party Dress and go right over the top of that. And you pretty much know the drill. By the end of this, you can ink blend in your sleep. As you can see, I'm pulling out all different brands of ink blending brushes. I am not in favor of one particular one. I just use them all. They're all fine, honestly. So once you get the good amount of ink color down, now you can even be heavy-handed in the center and a little bit lighter when you're going around the edges of those flowers, and you can create some pretty shading. Look how pretty that is. I mean, can you even? I wouldn't be able to draw that. I certainly wouldn't be able to draw it. And I find lining up layering stamps are a lot more difficult than lining up a layering stencil. I don't know why, but it just is. And I am a huge fan of these layering stencils. She has an entire line of layering stencils with the coordinating die, and I own them all. Every single one of them. As soon as she started introducing dies to her layering stamps, I was sold. And these take up no room at all. So easy. All right, so go ahead and blink that. That's not a word. Well, that is a word, but that's not what I meant to say. Go ahead and blend till your heart's desire, and then we'll be ready to do our 4th and final layering stencil. This is coming together so easy, and I just can't believe how pretty these cards are going to be once you're done. And if you want to do more than 2, then by all means do more than 2. Have yourself a stack of cardstock and just go to town. And again, you can be wild and creative with your colors if you want to. You can do some unconventional colors. Totally and completely up to you. All right, so when we're on the final layering step of the stencil, these are when your darkest colors come into play. So I'm going to use my darkest green, and I'm actually going to do for the top of the flowers, it's a Merlot color. So I went into like the purple red family once we're done here. So really, I say play with it. Right? Mix crazy colors together and see what happens with it. It's just paper. If you don't like it, you can either flip over the piece of paper and try a new design on the other side, or just get a new piece of cardstock. It's not a big deal. As you can see, I'm holding my stencil in place without any problems. But again, you can stick something heavy in the corner. If you got a coffee cup, use your coffee cup. Just don't, spill your coffee. Anything to hold it down if you want. Totally and completely up to you. Okay, once we're done here, let's lift that up, and ooh, isn't that pretty? Now, of course, we have to do the same exact thing for the other piece of cardstock, so go ahead and do that down. I'm telling you, you'll be able to do all this in your sleep once you're done. And yeah, this is fantastic. I want to talk to you a little bit about my freebie while I'm doing this ink blending here. You're going to see a little sneak peek of it when we go to assemble the card, but I've got and created some beautiful handwritten digital sentiments, and I have created a download for you. It is an all occasion sentiment set, beautifully handwritten, and you can use them for whatever you want. You can print them on a laser printer and foil them, or you can just print them on a regular printer and cut them out. It's completely up to you, but that is what I am providing to you for free for just being here with me today. So all the details on how to get that freebie will be listed on my speaker page. All right, so here it is, done. The white one, we're putting off to the side for now. That's regular white cardstock. We're moving on. This is the watercolor cardstock. Now, this is completely optional. I want you to keep in mind. The inks that I used are water reactive inks. I stamped on watercolored paper so I could spritz the mess out of this with water and watch all of that move around. Now, I spritzed it a little too much, but I'm going to keep it in the video to show you how you can fix a mistake like that if you do. I love the look of watercolor. I think it's absolutely beautiful. The imperfection and looseness of watercolor just is amazing to me, and that's what we've just done here just by spraying it with water. There were a few puddles, so I just used a cloth and kind of pulled up those puddles, and now I'm going to go ahead and heat this with my heat tool and get it good and dry. When you heat with your heat tool, heat the front side of the paper and then the back side of the paper, and that will avoid warping. So I did lose a little bit of the definition of the petals on that bottom flower there. So what I'm going to do is just grab that stencil, that number 4 layering stencil, and I'll just line it up right over the top. And then using that same ink blending brush that I used at the beginning, not even adding any more ink to it, I'm just using whatever ink is left on that. I'm just going to go in and add a little bit more color, just a tad, not a lot, a little dab will do ya. And then it kind of put that back in. I've got this like shadow effect going on. I just love the look of it because it looks like I hand painted that, and I totally didn't. So let your paint dry. Also, if you're kind of on the fence about your design, let your paint dry, give it a good look, and then go from there. And if you find you don't like it, flip it over, do it again, or grab a new piece of paper. It's only paper, people. It's only paper. All right, so I like both of my designs. I'm quite happy with them. So now it's time to actually turn them into cards. All right, so let's work on this first panel here. This is obviously the watercolored panel here. I am also going to be using a sentiment and die set from the Ton Stamps as well. Has a coordinating die that goes with it. Lots of scripty fonts paired with other words that you can create phrases with. So I'm going to heat emboss this. I love the look of white sentiments on black cardstock. So that's what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to grab my MISTI stamping tool, because anytime I stamp a sentiment without fail, I mess it up. So I use my stamping tool. I have to. Otherwise, I guarantee I'll mess up. Anytime I'm doing heat embossing, I need to prep my paper, and I'm going to prep it with an anti-static powder tool here. It just puts powder down, and that will keep your embossing powder from sticking to where you don't want it. So you can clearly see it goes down, it's white, and then you just brush it away with a clean cloth once you're done. So I'm going to flip my sentiment sideways here to make sure that I'm putting the stamp over where I just primed the paper. Then I'll close the hinged door of the MISTI, and that will pick up the stamp. I am using white pigment ink. Anytime I do white heat embossing, it's white pigment ink with white embossing powder. So I'll go ahead and ink up my stamp with white pigment ink. The ink I'm using is from scrapbook.com. White pigment ink is fantastic. It's juicy. It goes on wet. Perfect for heat embossing. Now here's why I use the MISTI. I put down a decent amount of ink, but for whatever reason, I didn't really get good coverage there in the middle. So this is when I told you I would mess up. Told you, nanny, nanny, boo, boo. So I'm going to go ahead and ink that up again. And since I haven't moved the paper, I haven't moved the stamp, I can go ahead and stamp it again without any issues. And then I will get a perfect impression. This is like called double, triple, quadruple stamping, whatever you want to call it. I call it stamping it again because I messed up. So I've got my paper ready to go. Now, listen, sentiments, when you are heat embossing, super fine embossing powder. Say it with me. Super fine embossing powder. That is key for sentiments. The embossing powder is superly, that's probably not even a word, fine. It's grounded really fine and it works. It is perfect for sentiments. So I'm using Wow Super Fine Embossing Powder. Then I'll go ahead and heat set it. Heat set it. Another tip for heat embossing is let your heat tool get heated up. Maybe let it just heat off to the side for a good 15 to 20 seconds. If you do that, your heat gun will be hotter, so it will melt your embossing powder faster, but also more evenly. And also go ahead and flip over your paper and heat it a little bit from the back side, and that will avoid any warping you may have. So as I mentioned, this stamp set comes with a coordinating die. So I'll go ahead, and it's so easy to line up. You can do it in your sleep. I'm grabbing tape. Another tip, lots of tips here. Take your tape and press it onto your skin, onto your clothes, onto your surface. You want to de-stick it a little bit. Otherwise, if you don't, you might find that as the tape goes through the machine, of course, it's a lot of pressure when you put it through your die cutting machine. So that is why you might find your tape tearing your paper after you die cut. So just remove some of the stick, press it wherever, clothes, face, hair. Don't put it in your hair. Don't put it in your hair. That would be bad. But I usually just press it to my skin, my hand, whatever, just to take a little bit of the stick away. And then I will go ahead and run this through my die cutting machine off screen. I use the Gemini Junior. It's plugged in, it's across the room, so I don't get that on camera, but that's what I did here. And this just die cuts like a dream. So now I have all these extra sentiments I can use for another time. But for this one, I'm going to use the congratulations sentiment. I am going to glue it down with my favorite glue of all time. If you know me, it's the only glue I use in my videos. It is the Barely Arts glue. It has a fine precision tip. I have had this glue for about 2.5 years now, and it has never clogged, not one single time. Goes on white and dries clear, and once it's dry, this baby's set. I like liquid glue because, see, that's a little crooked. So I'm like, no, I need to fix that. So I have a little bit of wiggle room when I glue this down, but once it's dry, that baby's set. It ain't going nowhere. Now, as you can see on that sentiment set, it also has some other sayings, quotes, phrases, so you can go ahead and build yourself up a little saying. So I grabbed a little image from the set. I'm going to ink that up, which is some black ink, and then just stamp it directly onto the card here. And I'm not using my MISTI, so I'm probably holding my breath as I stamp this, praying to God I get it straight. So it says, just a note to say congratulations. Boom! This card's almost done. We need to adhere it to a card panel. Okay, so this is a sneak of my freebie. Handwritten sentiments for all occasions. There's more than that, but you saw a little sneak right there. So I cut the congratulations off. I printed it on my printer and just cut it down. And here it is. I'm going to go ahead and build this up. But first I decided I needed a little something on the right-hand side because I had some ink, whatever. I don't know if my hand touched it or whatever, but I had some smeared ink up there. So rather than trying to erase it, I'm going to cover it up with some washi tape. If you don't have washi tape, use a marker, draw a couple of lines, whatever you want to do, or you could just trim the panel down smaller. So I'm just going to, this is just regular printer paper. This is nothing, no fancy paper here. Just printed my download that's available for free for you. And I'll go ahead and glue that down with the same glue I'm using. I'm just trying to get everything nice and straight with my mega scissors there. And look at that. Now you could pop that up with foam dimension if you want to, but I'm just doing everything flat, straight down, and we are good to go. You got to trim off the excess of that washi tape. You don't want that hanging off of your card. And then this panel is done. It's complete. If you wanted to add sequins or if you wanted to flick on some black paint or whatever, now's the time to do it. But I'm perfectly happy with how this looks, so it's time to put these onto some card bases. Now I pre-cut and score all of my card bases at one time. I do it about once a year. So I always have bases ready to go. So I just grab some red cardstock and I'm just gluing this down. Nothing special. For this card, I'm just gluing it directly on top right here, just like that. None of that red will be showing through whatsoever because I've already got that black and white washi tape over there to the right. For my other card, I'm going to let a little bit of the card base show through. So I'm just going to line it up a little bit differently on my card base there. And then I'll give myself a little red border, just like that. Trying to straighten it up as best I can, and then letting the glue do its thing. Another reason why I like that glue, that liquid glue, it gives me a little wiggle room because I didn't have it on straight at the first time. So once you're done with that, just flip it over, cut off any of the excess that you have hanging off the side there, and you are good to go. And we have done 2 cards here, same stencil. It's a 4-step layering stencil. And just stunning. The recipients are going to love your projects. I'm telling you. Layering stencils. It's where it's at. And if you can get one that has a coordinating die, even better.